In the Netherlands, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez defined the historical right of the Essequibo territory and the holding of the consultative referendum on December the 3rd before the International Court of Justice. In Palestine, the Israelis had is relentless against hospitals in the Gaza Strip. After 40 days of continuous bombardment, hospitals authorities confirmed that some of 4,710 children have been killed. U.S. President Joe Biden met on Wednesday with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in the Californian city of San Francisco within the framework of the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuela's Executive Vice President Delcy Rodriguez defended referendum on the Essequibo before the International Court of Justice. The presentation of the Venezuelan delegations takes place within the framework of Guyana's request to stop the sovereign consultation process in the Venezuelan nation. Vice President Rodriguez points out that an intervention with how will go against the Charter of the United Nations and will interfere in the internal affairs of Venezuela. In this sense, the representative stated that the determination and historical solidarity of the Venezuelan nation will be maintained. And the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela declared its rejection of the recent decision of the government of Guyana to begin oil production in Payara in an area that has not yet been delimited, which violates international law. The statement highlights that the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela expressed its categorical rejection of the announcement by the government of Guyana regarding the start of oil production by the floating production, storage, and of a landing platform FTS of prosperity in the Payara oil field in the Estabrook block, located in a maritime area, pending the limitations with each country to international public law and constitutes a new provocation by the government of the service of ExxonMobil. Venezuela has documented this illegally and repeatedly communicated to the Guyanese government and the Caribbean community that such actions are becoming a major source of destabilization in the region, undermining the legitimate interests of the Venezuelan people. The government of the Bolivarian Republic of the People of Venezuela reiterates to the government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and the transnational companies that exploit or provide associated services in the sun that it does not recognize any effect or right resulting from the concession that it grants or has granted in said maritime areas to be delimited. Venezuela and Paraguay announced the resumption of diplomatic and consular relations. In an official statement, the Paraguayan Foreign Ministry announced that the Republic of Paraguay and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, after talks between President Santiago Peña and Nicolás Maduro, they have decided to reestablish diplomatic and consular relations between both nations, as well as the reciprocal appointment of ambassadors in the next few days. In these regards, both parties have committed to resume bilateral relations with full respect for the fundamental principles of equality of rights, self-determination of peoples, non-interference in the internal affairs of other states, and solidarity, also based on the principles of Latin American integration and unity. In this new stage of renewed relations, both governments express their interest in advancing towards a good coexistence that will allow us to consolidate good relations between the states and preserve the natural friendship and solidarity between their peoples. U.S. President Joe Biden met on Wednesday with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in the Californian city of San Francisco within the framework of the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The two leaders began the talks by discussing how important and necessary the relationship between the two nations is, especially as the world recovers from the global pandemic. In his remark, the U.S. President stressed the importance of the competition between Beijing and Washington not turning into a conflict, adding that his previous meeting with Xi had been frank, direct, and useful. At the same time, he points out that for countries like China and the U.S., turning back is not an option. The Chinese leader said that his country's relationship with Washington has never been easy over the past 50 years. However, it has continued to move forward with ups and downs. The meeting between the two leaders is intended to help ease tensions between the two countries. Let's take a very short break, but remember you can now join us for our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. The Palestine-Israeli side is relentless against hospitals in the Gaza Strip. After 40 days of continuous bombardment, hospitals authorities confirmed that some 4,710 children have been killed. Humanitarian organizations announced that ambulances are facing extreme difficulties in carrying out wounded children and the bodies of martyrs due to the continuous bombardments. They point out that at least 7 medical workers of the Jordanian field hospitals and groups of children in Gaza were wounded at the entrance of the emergency services after the Israel bombardment. For his part, the Director General of the hospital in the Gaza Strip also denounced that the Israeli occupation forces has maintained the site and interrogation of patients, their families, and medical personnel in Al-Shifa hospital. In the early hours of Wednesday morning, the Israeli occupation army raided the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip, where thousands of people, including patients and refugees, are being housed. For more information, our correspondent Hudad Hegazi reports directly from the Gaza Strip.
At 2 a.m. this morning, the tanks, bulldozers, and soldiers of the Israeli occupation army proceed to enter the Al-Shifa hospital complex, the central and the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip, where thousands of Gazans were evacuated, as well as medical staff and hundreds of wounded and patients. In that raid, the occupation army soldiers took control of the external surgery building, as well as the emergency building and the ICU. In the process, the occupation army soldiers began to recruit doctors, patients, including evacuees, from the hospital complex, and underwent harsh and lengthy interrogations lasting approximately 10 hours. According to Palestinian sources, these interrogations were quite harsh, where the Israeli soldiers tried to get information from these doctors, from these patients, even from the innocent civilians, about where the Zionists could be found under the Palestinian resistance, and also if they knew where the leaders of the Palestinian resistance were hiding. It has been long hours of harsh interrogation where we as journalists did not know exactly what was going on because there are no reporters there. Even Israel did not allow anyone in that hospital to communicate with anyone outside. Later on, Israel proceeded to open a door or a corridor where some of the people who had finished this interrogation were allowed to leave. However, in the process in which some of the Gazatis proceed to come out, the Israeli occupation army proceed to shoot them directly. So even that the corridor and that door where they were assured that it was a safe place and where the Gazatis had finished their interrogation and could come out has been totally false. So far, the occupation forces are in that hospital, We don't know the situation of the doctors, the evacuates, the patients, how they are. However, quite difficult hours. We will not know how this Zionist and criminal entity could act with those innocent civilians who are inside that facility.
Our correspondent from Gaza, Nora Harasen, interviewed health workers who expressed their experiences with the current humanitarian crisis. The destruction of medical equipment, the insecurity of medical personnel and patients are some of the elements denounced.
We are standing here in front of the intensive care section in the Al-Shifa medical complex, which suffers from the electricity cut and the non-existence of fuel despite the alarm calls from the Ministry of Health. This section was subjected to a direct bombardment early this morning by the Israeli occupation forces. Here in the intensive care, those children who were connected to life-saving machines, the life support machines, were moved here to the corridors in view of the intensive attacks. Here, the people have had all life support equipment removed and are at the imminent risk of death because they have been removed from the life support machines and other life support equipment. Here, there are more than 29 patients who are victims of this tragedy, and only some of the alternative electricity remains from the USB equipment that was left there, where some patients were connected to the breathing equipment because if they moved to the corridors, they would die immediately. Here the patients were moved to this area, which is considered the safest because the intensive care section is not safe. These are the consequences of the Israeli bombing of this hospital. We do not know if we can move this side. We will remain safe. Before we move a little and the camera move forward a little more to transmit what happened inside this section. Look at these attacks that reached the same place where the patients and medical staff were. Here were destroyed the air conditioning equipment and the machines necessary to control the temperature in the intensive care unit. As you can see, the patients, instead of being connected and in their best to save their lives, this place was completely evacuated. As you can see, the medical teams were forced to do so because they were going to be objects of snipers and attacks by Israelis. This is what is happening. Even the intensive care rooms, even the patients in danger of death, Israelis looking to assassinate them. Here in the hospital, our hospital is completely surrounded and blockaded. No one can move inside the buildings, neither inside the corridors or the rooms. No one can move inside the buildings. No one can move inside the corridors. No one can move inside the room. No one can move inside the hospital. Here the doctors try to save the girl and pull her some oxygen manually. This girl is suffering because of the bombings and also because of moving their beds from one place to another. This is the real picture of what is happening here in Al-Shifa Medical Complex.
In Gaza, hospital authorities announced the expulsion of children and patients from Al-Shifa Hospital by the Israeli troops. The Director General of the Gaza Strip Hospital, Mohammed Essequibo, mentioned that the soldiers of the Tel Aviv regime also committed a number of violations against the refugees in the hospital. Director Essequibo warns that the Al-Shifa complex has 650 patients, including 22 in intensive care. The health authority also called for the wounded to be evacuated to Egypt for treatment and for fuel to be brought to all medical centers as a matter of urgency. Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, where you'll be able to watch interviews, top stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and active the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. One financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo on Thursday called for a united front with African leaders to demand reparations for the transatlantic slavery and colonial era damage. The Akufo-Addo administration is in favor of reparations and his speech at the year's UN General Assembly to demand greater recognition of the impact of colonial exploitation. The Ghanaian leader said that no amount of money can undo the damage caused by the slave trade and its consequences, which he said is an issue that the world must confront and can no longer ignore. Akufo-Addo reiterated that the entire African continent deserves a formal apology from the European nations implicated in the slave trade, and add that Africa will work together with the Caribbean to advance reparations, calling them a valid demand for justice.
No amount of money can restore the damage caused by the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences, which will span many centuries. But surely, this is a matter that the world must confront and can no longer ignore. And even before these discussions on reparations conclude, the entire continent of Africa deserves a formal apology from the European nations involved in the slave trade.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin arrives in Jakarta, Indonesia, to meet with Asian defense chiefs to talk on issues ranging from the Myanmar crisis to the ongoing conflict in Palestine. Southeast Asian defense ministers called for an end to the Myanmar crisis and to the Israel side on Palestine on Wednesday as they gather for talks that will include meetings with regional counterparts and the Pentagon chief. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, meetings in Jakarta were dominated by issues ranging from the Myanmar crisis to the conflict in Palestine. The UK Supreme Court rejects a government's plans to send migrants to Rwanda, holding a lower court ruling that it was unlawful in a major setback for Premier Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak's key immigration policy has been dealt a ball after UK's highest court rejects the government's plans to deport people seeking asylum to Rwanda. The government claims that the 140 million sterling pounds Rwanda schemes will be a key deterrent for the growing number of asylum seekers reaching the UK via mobile traveling across the channel, a claim that refugees characterized have rejected. In the United Kingdom, London's Kew Gardens, placed in the world's intangible cultural heritage list since 2003, unveils a Christmas slide show focus on energy sustainability. Kew Garden in southwest London presents the 11th edition of Christmas at Kew. It's a popular festive light shows featuring 22 art installations in a nighttime tour of the botanical garden. This year's shows focus on protecting the environment and all of the light structures, including an impressive giant behavior art inspired by the natural world.
We work really hard on sustainability every year. We've been reducing year on year. This year we're probably using 40% less power than we have done before. We use HVO, which is a hydro-treated vegetable oil, in our generators, but where we can we're using mains power.
Well, that's all. We have come to the end of this news brief, but before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to share our newscasts and contribute to provide alternative news sources on the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also on our socials. So we're on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English, I'm from the South, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.